Hi, I'm John from EvoGov, and in this video, we're going to design and edit slideshow images so that they work properly and look great in your website. There's a couple of tricks and tips that I'll share with you to make these slideshows work really well and load quickly. So let's just kind of dive into it. I'm going to start with our theme website, which is just at themes.evogov.com. And I'm bringing this up just to show what the goal is. What are we trying to build here? So I'm going to go to just some page elements, and let's look at a sample slideshow that might have a menu next to it on an interior page. And here we can see we've got a slideshow with some titles on it. There is a main title and then a secondary title right underneath of it. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see this little control box. And the slideshow controls are something you can turn on and off. You definitely want to have the slideshow controls visible because it's a necessary item for ADA compliance. And in this installation right here, where you've got a side menu and then the slideshows to the right, one of the things that we have to consider is how much room we have to work with. And that sort of determines how big the slideshow can be. So what we're looking at is a page that's about 1,400 pixels wide with a 300 pixel wide menu on the side, and that leaves about 1,100 pixels in width for the slides. So one of the challenges, the reason that's important, and one of the challenges in building these slideshows is that some of our customers will drag a photo up into the content management system to use in their slideshow without doing any sort of editing to it whatsoever. And it will still work. However, that image could be really large in both dimensionally large and also in file size. So here's an interior page with a menu. Let's look at another one. An application page or a full width page. We just internally here at the company call these application pages. Typically, you'll have a page that is a form, let's say, that might have a slideshow at the top, or some other page that doesn't include a menu. So we're looking at the same exact slideshow on a page with no side menu, and the sizing is the exact same. This is a 1,000 pixel wide slideshow, and it does have the titles and it does have the controls here. And you can also pause it and go backwards. The pause is actually the main function that's required by ADA compliance. So this is what we're shooting for. We want a slideshow that loads quickly, animates nicely, has the ability to put titles on it, and that will also work on mobile devices. And you'll see that this scales down nicely and it fits on any screen size. Okay, so this is the goal. This is what we're trying to achieve. So before we go any further into that, let's talk about the sizing of the images, because this is one of the toughest parts for most folks, is knowing what size the images should be. Well, in the case of this example, if we go to the back end of the website and basically you hover over a website and go to slideshows, okay? And that's where you can see the list of slideshows that are already installed in the website. Perhaps you want to make a new one. If you go to the first page of this, you'll see this is where you put the slideshow dimensions in. And this particular slideshow is 1,000 pixels wide by 560 pixels in height. I'm going to show how we got to that number in just a second, but this is where that's set. So that's the reason I'm showing you that. In the slides themselves, here you can see the slides that are in the slideshow. These individual slide boxes, the gray boxes here, are drag and drop, and that's how you reorder the slides that are in the slideshow. If we look at the fields that are available to us, we've got the image URL that's being served for a particular slide. If you click in the box, it will pop up to our media library, and then you can just simply browse to the folder where the images should be. You can see we've got a folder here called Group Slideshow. I could click on that, and we've got 4 slides here. If we needed to upload a new slide, once it's prepared properly and sized properly, you would drag it to this pop-up. It'll then upload it. You select it. This pop-up closes, and then you've got your URL here to the image. So that's how those are entered. The next field is a title field. This is the slide 1 title, and that's the primary title. If we go back and look at what this looks like, You see the slide one title right there. So there's a primary title and then a subtitle. And on the back end, these are those two fields, right? So you've got your primary title here and your secondary title here. The next field is a custom URL field, and for the most part, you can ignore that. This was designed so that we could place video clips in between the static slides, which is doable, but we don't recommend it any longer because we've got a streaming server for videos that can have static images in them. But if you're curious how to do that and you've got a video clip that you want to put in your slideshow, the help bubble here behind the question mark shows you the format of what the video tag would need to look like to go into that field. And it's just above and beyond what most users can do. So, it's not recommended. It's just really an expert field. I would ignore that one for now. The next field is a URL field, and this is where the slide's going to link to. So each individual slide can have one URL that can link it somewhere else. The alt text is basically just a written description of what the image is. This field and the second field here, that's ARIA label, both of those are doing the same thing. They're basically giving you an opportunity to enter a text description of the image for screen readers and ADA compliance checkers. The photo credits field will show a small camera icon on when the image is displayed, and then if the visitor mouses over the icon, it will slide out and show who the photographer was. So this is where you would put the photographer's name in if you needed to apply a photo credit to a slide. The last field's at the bottom here, including the add button field. This is a mechanism that we built to allow a slide to have multiple buttons that can float over the image and that they can link to specific areas of your website. It's not used by many customers, and we've had some really custom integrations for customers where that does come into play. I really wouldn't mess with this because the design of the buttons and how they overlay, the color scheme for them, all that is set in the design files of the site. If it's something that you're really interested in, you would work with your project manager and our design team to make those buttons look and work the way you want. But for the most part, it's kind of overkill. It's just easier to have the slide itself be the link and not have additional links on top of that, because these slides are going to pop in and pop out, and it really doesn't give the user enough time to look at every one of those buttons. So again, it's there if you want it, just like the video tag, but I would just kind of ignore those for now. And that's pretty much it. These are all of the options that you have. You can also turn a slide on and off. So maybe you had a slide for something seasonal. Maybe there's a winter slide with snow, and then once it's springtime, you don't want to show that any longer. So you could literally just turn it off. And then as the seasons change, come back and turn it back on. So that's what the active button does. And that's helpful. All right. So that's it for all that you can do on the back end of the Slideshow Manager. The whole goal is to keep that simple. Now let's get into choosing the right size for your image and then editing your images to make sure that they're going to work and load quickly. So let's move to that portion. Here I have a document that I set up to kind of illustrate how we choose the sizes for images based on where they're going to go in the website. And I've got an image here that we're going to use for this demonstration. It's a photo of a bridge. This is actually from one of our projects for a county. They provided this nice photo of this bridge. But the raw file that we received is a 5.2 megabyte JPEG. Now, could we put that image directly in a slideshow and just use it as is? Yes, but it's a large file size. The largest file size that we kind of shoot for when we're optimizing images for a slideshow is about 150 to maybe 180K per image. And that's because most slideshows are going to have 6 to a dozen images max. If you get above 12 images, it can, even if the images are optimized, it can really slow down the website. So we want to keep the number of images below a dozen. And I think 6 to 8 usually works pretty well. Again, if you're going to get higher than that, you may want to consider just using a video, especially if it's for a homepage. And we do a lot of the video editing, if not most of it, for our clients. So anyways, there's our source image. And then I've also got a county seal image here that we're going to use. in a minute, and just to show you how you can do some compositing with these slideshow images. So what I've done is I pulled the bridge image into this mock-up here, and the size of this image right here, the physical size of it is 1920 by 1080. So it's 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels in height. That's also known as a full HD image or a 1080p image. And this is as big as your images should be in your website, pretty much for anything. Sometimes if you have a nice SLR camera, a digital camera, and you take a photo that's got 12 or more megapixels in size, it's going to be ginormous, like in as far as how many pixels it is in height and width. But for the web, we're dealing with 72 DPI, not 300 DPI, which is for print. I know that that's not really super important to memorize, but just know that the web is not as detailed as like a print photo. So we're balancing the resolution, the size, and the quality to make sure that these images are going to load properly. So as a guideline, I would say your images really don't need to be wider than 1920. And if you were to just pull an image out of a camera, even if it's a giant image, that same ratio is probably going to apply, which is 16 by 9. Okay, so 16 units in width by 9 units in height. If you divide that, you get an aspect ratio. In this case, it's 0.56. Now, if I resize this image from 1920 down to 1,000 pixels wide, but I keep the same height ratio, the same aspect ratio, that comes out to 560 pixels in height. And 1,000 pixels in width is actually a really great size for an interior page slideshow. This is actually the exact size of that slideshow I just showed you, okay? That's working well in the example. And the interesting thing here is we didn't have to crop anything in this image. Cropping comes into play when you try to create an image that's more of a letterbox and in size. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I just took this image and I made it smaller in height, it crops off the top of the bridge, and it's not ideal. What if we wanted to, I'm going to show you how to crop this image without cutting things off when we get to the part where we're resizing images. But this is really just theory to talk about, what are the ideal sizes for things. So let's get into the two main types of slideshows that we see in websites that we build. The first is the homepage slideshow. So the typical design strategy that we employ now is to have a slideshow on the homepage that goes edge to edge. And it's the most impactful. It looks really handsome in the website. It's nice not to have curtains on the side if you can help it. So when we go edge to edge and we still want the slideshow to look good on a large monitor, we're sticking true to that 1920 by 1080 in size. Now, the downside of that is that if someone has a really big monitor, the wider you go, the taller the image gets, and the struggle becomes the fact that the homepage content gets really pushed down. And if you look at these gray boxes that I created here, this shows you the available area of the homepage that can peek up below the slideshow, and the overall box here is 1920. But the content area of the website typically is around 1400. So what I'm saying here is that if you're building a slideshow for your homepage, it's hard to get away with 1920 by 1080 because it pushes the content down so far. And if someone has an older, like a 13-inch laptop, they're never going to see the homepage content. They're always going to just see the slideshow, and they'll have to scroll to get to anything. And really, you don't want that for your website visitors. So it's very, very rare that we build a slideshow for a homepage that's truly 1080 in height. So now we get into how do we make that more of a letterbox shape where it's a little bit shorter in height, but we keep the same width, right? So this is actually a really good size for a homepage, this 1920 by 780. It's ideal, brings up the content quite a bit. And then over here on the right, this would be the absolute minimum I think we'd ever go. just to give you some contrast here to compare. This is 500 pixels in height. Now let's take a look at what that looks like. If we go back to my theme site, we have a sample slideshow here in this theme that we call clean. It's our clean theme. And this is a 1920 by 500 pixel slideshow. And you can see it's great, right? But the images work well because they're landscaped. There's a lot of cropping going on to make these work. If you had a typical image of maybe a fire engine or something or a building, this may not work, especially if it's a photo of people. You may cut their heads off and it just wouldn't look attractive. In this case, it works, but the choice of subject matter of the photos comes into play when we're dealing with letterbox slideshows where there's not a ton of height. In this example, it works great. And this, again, would be probably the minimum that we would see for a slideshow in height, okay, about 500. So ideally, you're sort of settling around 1920 by 800 in that range. This particular one here is 780, that's fine, but a minimum of maybe 500, okay? So those are some of the things that come into play when we're in the design stage of a website and we're getting photography from the client. We're looking at the subject matter, we're making decisions about, how much scrolling should there be and what are some of those limitations. So this is a good guideline for the homepage. Let's talk about interior pages. So once you leave the homepage, you're going to an interior page. Now, if it's a department page that has a side menu that just shows that department's content, then we need to accommodate for the width of that side menu. And here you can see a typical side menu is about 300 pixels in width. The overall content width of the page to make it fit on most screens is a max of about 1400, which leaves 1100 pixels left over for our slideshow. Now, here we see a representation of that 1000 pixel by 560 pixel slideshow that I showed you earlier, and that jives with what's up here, right? So if we were to take this image, drag it down here, you'll see that fits pretty nicely on this interior page. If we're dealing with a page that we call an application page or one that doesn't have a side menu, you can get away with a little bit larger slideshow. So if you had a slideshow that was just for one section of the site, it's not going to have a side menu, but you wanted that same aspect ratio of height to width, then you would go with something like this, which would be 1200 by 672. And it's still going to size properly for mobile and work well. So that's a good size. If you have a 1200 pixel width content area, the 1000 still works really well. And this is how most sites have been built up until recently. We only started going with a 1400 content area in the last couple of years. It was kind of too big for folks that had older computers in the past, but it's now pretty much the standard for us. If your site has a content area that's around 1200, then I would settle in on this 1000 by 560. On the height of these for interior pages, we typically don't go, if we do need to make it a bit letterboxed on the interior page, we don't go lower than like 300 pixels in height on the interior page. So now we've got a game plan. Now we know that we probably, I'm just going to make up a scenario for, I'm a website manager. I need to make a nice interior page slideshow. We probably want to try this 1000 by 560. Again, let's look at that. Let's go back, take a look at what that might look like. Okay. And here's how much space that takes up. Now you may say, I really don't want it to be that tall. That's fine. Maybe go a little bit shorter, but this is 1000 by 560. So you make that decision, create the slideshow, and then it's time to create your images. Now, I recognize I'm going to show you two different ways to edit images, and I want to recognize the fact that a lot of people use Canva, and Canva is great. I've used it. It's okay. But when I looked at perhaps using Canva or a free account on Canva to resize these images, honestly, it was too many steps. And I think I found a much better way to show you here how to do it. If you're a pro with Canva and you already know how to resize your images and export them from there, great. But I think even if you are an expert with Canva, a couple of the tips that I'm going to show you are really going to help. So let's go into how I would approach doing this. And now I'm bringing up a website. This is a tool that we use for mockups. It's called Figma. It's figma.com. It's free to join. And you can use it for small projects. So here's the situation. Let's say you work at a municipality and they're not going to buy you Photoshop. And they're not going to buy you a Canva subscription. And you need a free way to resize your images. Figma is probably the best way to do that. And I'm pretending that I'm you here. I do have a Figma account with hundreds of diagrams in it, but I created a brand new account this morning just to do this demo. So you go to figma.com, you sign up, and then it dumps you onto this page and you have no idea where to start. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new design file. So you click this button up here and it's going to give us a blank canvas. There's nothing really to see here. You're not really sure what to do. Don't get freaked out. This is going to be okay. And I'm going to take that bridge photo and drag it in and let go. So again, this is the photo given to us by a customer, and it zooms us in a bit, and all you do is hit the minus key on your keyboard and you zoom out, okay? Now we can see the full bridge image. And again, remember we're shooting for 1920 by 560. So we click on the image, and then over on the right-hand side here, you see the width and the height. In the width field, we're going to type in we're going to type in 1000 and hit enter. And it makes it a lot smaller on the screen, but we're dealing with the correct width. Let's hit the plus sign on the keyboard and zoom in. And you'll notice that this image is not full HD. It's actually it's not the exact same aspect ratio that we were talking about. We want it to be 560 in height, remember? But this one is 645. So what you would do here is unlink the height to width aspect ratio. So you click this little chain link to unlink that, and then you can just change the height to be 500, and it's going to automatically crop it. Now, this may be good in most scenarios where it takes a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom, but in a case like this, what if our goal was to keep the top of the bridge in view? We don't really care about the bottom so much, but we want to see the top of the bridge. So I'm going to hit Control Z, undo, and then instead of just typing in the height of 560, we're going to go to the edge here and hold the Alt key. And this lets us drag each edge separately. And then just looking at the box over on the right, I can line it up until it's at 560. And there it is. All right. So now we have an image that's 1,000 pixels tall by 560, and we see the full top of the bridge. This is perfect. This is perfect. So what do we do next? Well, now that we've resized our image, we're going to export it as is, and I'm going to show you some of the problems this creates with file size, but let's just have a go at it. So I'm going to click on the image, and over on the right-hand side, we have this little export area. We expand it, and we only have the one image element selected. Let's hit export. And this is putting it in my downloads folder over here. And we can see great, it made us a new image, and it's cropped, but it's 1.2 megabytes. And you may remember I said our goal is to try to get to 150 to 180K kind of max. And think about it for a minute. If we had 10 of these images, right, we would have literally 10 megabytes, more than 10 megabytes of data that we would have to download for the page to load, and it would just crush the performance of our page. Another option, instead of a PNG, is to do a JPEG. So let's try that. We'll hit the drop down here for the type of file, and then hit export once again. And this is going to export a JPEG for us. Now, it's a little bit better. JPEG is actually a kind of compression for images. So we can see here that we're under a meg, but it's 867K, still bigger than kind of what we were hoping for. Now, if you were looking closely, you'll notice that our slides in our slideshow, if I go back to it, we're using a different kind of file format here. It's called a WebP. This is something new that was invented by Google, and it's a web photo file format. They also have a WebV for video. And basically, it's a brand new kind of compression to compete with PNGs. It's amazing. And if you ever use the Google speed testing tool to check the speed of your website and make sure your pages are loading well, it's kind of funny because any image that Google sees, their speed test tool sees that's not a WebP, it's going to give you a recommendation to use a WebP image, which is a little bit biased, but it's an amazing tool. So there is a way inside of Figma, which let's go back to it. There is a way inside of Figma here to get a third-party plugin that's free to export as a WebP image. However, it requires the pro version of this. So a workaround would be, and this is a final step. You might have a slideshow with just a couple of images in it. You know, is it going to be the end of the world if it's 800K? No. But if you really want to take this stuff, you know, all the way, then I would definitely use something like this website here, cloudconvert.com, which is going to let us create a WebP image from the images that we exported. So let's do that real quick. We're going to select a file from my computer, and we're in our downloads folder here, and I'm going to select, let's try the PNG. And we're going to convert that PNG to a WebP format. And let's look at the tools here that it gives us. We want it to be 1,000 pixels wide by 560 pixels in height. And then this is the critical part here with the quality, because there's a quality slider when you create a WebP image. And we want it to be 50%. This is going to be the quality level that we want to choose here. All right. So let's hit OK. And let's see where that goes. Oh, and then we hit the convert button. There we go. One last step. All right. So it's working for us. It's processing. And then here is the image. It looks really good. Let's hit download. And now look at this. This is our download folder, and there's the image. Oh my goodness. It's only 65K. That is amazing. So, you know, with a tool like this, you can take large images, even if it's a slideshow image for your homepage, and bring down the file size dramatically without destroying the quality. So 50% is kind of perfect. I mean, it can add a tiny bit of graininess to things like clouds or areas in the sky where there's a lot of the same color. So you might want to play with that slider just to make sure that the quality is perfect. But here's a free tool that will let you go online and convert any PNG that's too big in file size to a perfectly compressed file for your slideshow. All right. So now that we've done it the free way, I'm going to show you very quickly how we do it internally with Photoshop. If you're blessed to have a license to Photoshop or Adobe Creative Cloud and you're able to do this with Photoshop, it's actually a little bit quicker. So let me open up Photoshop real quick. I meant to have this open already, but let me open it real quick. Just take a second. It's opening on my other screen. And there we go. We're in Photoshop. Now, this is how kind of straightforward it is in Photoshop. We're going to create a new file. So file new. And we get a pop-up that allows us to choose the size of our image. I've already done this once as a test. So we can see that we've got 1,000 for the width, 560 for the height. And then very important, a lot of times Photoshop will default the resolution to 300, which is for print. You don't want 300 DPI resolution for the web. You want it to be 72 always, okay? So we hit okay, and then we get our canvas, and we take the original bridge photo that's 5.2 megs, we drag it in and let go. And then all that we have to do here is drag the corners until it overlaps the canvas slightly, okay? Position it to where we want. Let's put it kind of right there, I guess. That's perfect. And then we're ready to export to WebP. So we hit File, Save a Copy. And we're going to do it. We're going to save this to our computer. And you get the typical, like PNG here as the default, but down at the bottom, check it out. The newest versions of Photoshop will have WebP. So we're going to just call it sample Photoshop.webp. Okay. We hit save, and then there's an intermediate step that pops up that asks us what kind of compression do we want for our file. And again, we're going with 50, just like we did on the Cloud Convert website. And we hit OK. And there we go. It's exporting it, and it's not really showing the size yet. There it is. So it's slightly bigger than the one that we got from Cloud Convert, but that's still pretty dramatic. To be able to go from Photoshop to a WebP in seconds, it's just really great. Once you have your artboard set up here with the right size, it then becomes trivial to make all the slides for your slideshow, because you're going to drag each one in, and they just each become a layer, and then you save them out one by one. So that's how you would create each individual slide in there as well. All right, so that's pretty much it. The goal here was, how do we create a slideshow? How do we choose what size our images should be, keeping in mind the aspect ratios. Make sure that you're always using a 72 DPI image for the web, not a 300 DPI image. It's going to make it way too large in file size. If you do take that extra step to change your file type to WebP, you're going to reap benefits of your site loading much, much faster. And then on the back end, when you create your slideshow, it's always a good idea to put in the alt text and the ARIA label here, which will describe your image for ADA compliance. That's another key component. And if your site was built a while ago, if we did your site maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and you start putting titles in and it doesn't look quite right, it may need a theme update from us. Just let us know. Come into our live chat or ask your project manager for information on that. And the other option is, if you're just too busy for this and you'd like for us to do it all, just resize your images, make them look better, we can do that. Oh, and there is one other thing I meant to show you. Let me go back to Figma, just like a final little tip. So we made this slide initially, we resized it in Figma, and I wanted to show you how you can do some compositing. I mentioned that early on. I have an image of a seal here, which is basically a logo for a county. And this is a seal that we designed. And if you put that into the slide and we resize it, now I'll hold the shift key to which will let us keep the height and width. Maybe we want to have a seal like this that has the county, a slide like this that has the county seal in it. Now, the only difference once you start to add other elements to this is just make sure that all of them are selected. Hit Control G or Command G on a Mac to group them together. So now it makes it one element. Both the image, the background image, and the seal are one item now. And when we hit export, it's going to export it as a group. See that? And then if we hit the button, we're going to get a new export as a group. And let's see, I think it's going to be, 1105. It's this one right here, group 1. So let's open that up. And there's the final product. See that? So you can add additional images on top of your slide background if you like. You can also use text if you want to put your own titles in and do that right from Figma. So Figma is a big win, and it's much fewer steps than if you were to use something like Canva. I hope this video helped you with your slideshow images. If you have any questions, let us know. We're always here to help. And there's a live chat at the bottom of our content management system. And there's also a live chat at EvoGov.com, our homepage. Feel free to ask us anything there. And that's it. Thanks for watching.